2015 timeframe, we're looking for a way to be involved as a couple. And so Pat and I, because our personalities are so different, we always volunteered and led different ministries in the church. And so in a big church, yeah, there's lots of opportunities to volunteer wherever your interests lie, and whatever God has revealed your spiritual gifts, then it's good to apply them, right? So in service to others in the church. So preparing for marriage, we both embraced it because it was a way for both of us to contribute equally in a marriage. So you start out as a coach or a mentor. You're assigned 2 to 3 engaged couples who tend to be very, have a rosy view of the future, right? So the purpose of the ministry is ask all the critical questions, cover a broad range of topics from easy to hard. And it's we actually had a lot of fun with it because we were surprised the two of us could share so freely and transparently about different aspects of our marriage, how we struggled early in our marriage. And when we got married in the early 80s, that kind of ministry or counseling was not available in the church. So by the time you got to the mid to late 80s, it started proliferating, across a lot of different churches. And in fact, where we were in San Francisco at our Chinese ethnic church, we actually helped our pastor establish a similar kind of ministry. So we were familiar with just the dynamics of what needs to happen. How do you inform engaged couples before the wedding as much as possible? How do you get to know each other in a way to minimize surprises?
We really love this ministry because when we got married, we had nothing. And because of that, that's why we have a passion for marriage, because we don't want these young people to go through what we went. And it's hard if you don't need to go through that and you already know what's going to be coming down the pipeline, then you're ready for it.
Indirectly, it's divorce mitigation. Yeah. Because every one of us, without exception, we know people in the church have been divorced. So, and then when one of my college roommates got divorced, yeah, I would say we were all surprised, right? Like, how could this happen, right? Part of the leadership turmoil that we encountered the 2017, 2018 timeframe, Dale Sutherland, as the executive pastor, dismissed the entire team, both the couple that taught it and the couple that did all the behind-the-scenes coordination to make sure the ministry ran smoothly. And Dale brought in a pastor he knew from long ago who was highly qualified to do it, but he was put in a situation where there was no administrative support, either from staff or volunteers. And so you had one staff administrator who was trying to learn everything from scratch about how to run this ministry. I'm an experienced manager in the private sector. I manage projects, and it was easy to see there's chaos, and it's just my personal inclination. How do we restore order so that the ministry can run smoothly? So I did it gradually over that spring, and the pastor who taught it was so grateful that somebody was actually managing things so he could focus on the teaching and not be concerned, is the room going to be opened? Simple things like that. And there's a certain hospitality aspect to when you coordinate, because you're meeting engaged couples for the first time, and you want them to be comfortable enough to open up to each other, not just to us, but to each other about some of those hard questions that come up in the course. During our tenure, it was noticeable that there was organizational chaos. So this is just my perception as somebody who's experienced as a manager and executive. Okay, so what happens is that the communication channels are not clear. The accountability channels are not clear. So, and also the answers you get are always, they have a lot of latency. So what happens is that just simple things like we need to be assigned a room to meet at the church. Normally that answer would have come in days. It took weeks or sometimes over a month just to get the answer. In the meantime, we feel like we're in limbo, like, are we still doing this or not? We were aghast pretty much, well, why can't we advertise the ministry, promote the ministry, make it known when the next session's starting? Clearly by the fall of 2018, it's not in the worship bulletin. By early 2019, it was disappeared from this brochure wall. We used to call it a slat wall. So and we were perplexed, well, why is this communications policy that clearly is dictated by David Platt, where there's no way to make known to the congregation that the ministry is available.
He won't let us advertise it neither on the TVs or, bulletins, anything.
What's being both promoted from the pamphlet, being posted on monitors that rotate announcements. Missions was definitely an emphasis in terms of opportunity. There's a training avenue about how do you prepare to go overseas as a missionary. Whereas, let's say more indigenous ministries, such as preparing for marriage, and even what we heard from people in Kids Quest is that they were also starved for volunteers. They had difficulty to get enough volunteers. Before David Platt, you could easily see 25 to 40 engaged couples during one of the spring or fall sessions. And I would say during our tenure, it ranged anywhere from 8 to 12. Engaged couples. I think the most disturbing part was that nobody could give me assurances about support for the ministry. It was just very fuzzy, well, what are the priorities in the church? Now, how do I ascertain that? It's because I know that from organizational dynamics in the private sector, or let's say in the corporate world, that whenever there's a leadership change, whoever comes in establishes new direction, new vision, there's this not invented here perspective that normally comes into place. In other words, that this is not my project, I'll no longer fund it. Or I'm going to reallocate staff to make sure that activity dies while I promote my own. And so I saw that right away. That's what's happening. In the church context, at McLean Bible Church, what I saw was there's an abandonment of the flock. This new emphasis from David Platt was a greater emphasis on missions. Alternatives to serve were not promoted.
You're guilt-tripped. It's the right thing to do is to go and become missionaries. And according to David, it sounds like, yes, it's better to go out to Timbuktu and become a missionary than your neighborhood. So, you can't, I got this guilt feeling every time I hear this. I go like, should I? But I know I'm not an extrovert. I'm an introvert. I know that's not my strength and that's not my what God gave me to do. So I'm not going to push it.
Yeah, and certainly we're sensitive about missions because one of our daughters just came back from 5 years in Cambodia. So, and she's been with this particular Christian ministry for 15 years. Okay, so she understands, how do you recognize somebody who has this heart for missions? We know it because one of our daughters has it. The congregational meeting, it turned into it was more promotional. It was no longer a business meeting. The messages that I communicated is always carefully selected. That's my perception, okay? And what's the truth about whether McLean Bible Church is part of the SBC denomination, or does it remain independent per the Constitution, Church's Constitution? The clear answer is no, which means, what does it equate to? It means that we were lied to from David Platt. So both in a previous congregational meeting, sometime, well, definitely before that critical elder election in June 2021, but also shortly after that, when it was clear that the vote did not get the congregational approval. And there was, David offered his defense about the church being independent, but the facts are irrefutable.